Hello, and welcome everybody to another episode of r/ProRevenge. My name's Ryan, the official host here at Reddit Voice, and I look forward to bringing you guys today's top stories. Before I do though, I'd just really appreciate it if you could hit that like button and that subscribe button with notifications turned on, so you could stay up to date on all the latest videos. My contractor was cheap, so I made sure to get my money's worth. So this is actually what happened between my father and the contractor who built his house, my childhood home. In 2000, my parents and their two young children, ages 7 and 5, that's me, were looking to move into a house big enough for a family of 4 that they could stay in for a very long time. They found a newly constructed street in a quiet neighborhood in a town known for being family friendly. It was perfect. There were only 4 available lots, so my mother chose the one she liked best. Now the houses on these lots were still under construction, so they were mostly just framing at this point. So my parents decided to contact the contractor, let's call him Alfred, and see if they could have any input into the design, as they had already set up a mortgage agreement on the property. Alfred agreed, but didn't let them do too much, which wasn't all that bad. My parents were pretty busy trying to sell their old house anyway. A few months go by and the house is finally ready to be moved into. My parents are thrilled. They finally have their family home. We move in and everything's great. For about 36 hours. On literal day 2, the furnace in the basement breaks and spews smoke throughout the whole house, setting off the smoke detectors. The police and fire department show up, investigate, and tell us that we can return in 72 hours. So we stay in a nearby hotel for the next 3 days. Everything's great again until we start noticing a bunch of small details that Alfred seemed to have overlooked. My dad hires a home inspector to look at the house, and the inspector found numerous faults that could have cost thousands to fix. My dad is pissed. So my dad, being the calm asshole that he is, and I love him for it, decides to go get some help in paying for these repairs to his 7-month-old house. You see, Alfred had been the contractor for 4 houses on the street, of which only one, ours, had been bought. So my dad went to the bank and expressed interest in the other lots. He asked that a $1,000 lien be placed on each one. This was all legal. Alfred found out and was rightfully angry. He couldn't sell these lots because of the liens. He asked my dad to remove them, and my dad agreed and said he would if Alfred paid for the repairs. Alfred refused to pay, so my dad refused to lift the liens. Alfred then sues my parents. My parents countersue, and the court rules in favor of my parents. My dad had to lift his liens, but Alfred, he had to pay my parents $50,000, instead of just paying $2 to $3K for repairs, and a home inspector looked at the other 3 lots and made him pay for the repairs on those as well. TLDR, my dad's contractor is a cheap asshole, so my dad legally makes him pay more than what he owed. Taking down Queen Karen, president of the HOA. Okay, this happened some years ago, 1985 to be exact. I was 45 when this happened, and 81 now. So after my second retirement, I started doing property management. I bought this 2,500 square foot luxury home with the sole intention of renting it out. Now, I didn't know how bad the HOA was, but when I became the owner, I soon found out. This all took place in 2 years' time. Karen would literally have a problem with everyone in the neighborhood. Trash cans left out? Fined. Loud music after 10 p.m.? Fined. Yard sale without permission? Fine. Removing dead plants and replanting without approval? You get fined. It went on and on like this. Now the community could run for the HOA board, but the HOA board chose the president. 6 out of the 10 members on the board liked Karen, so she always kept her job. Her husband was in the medical field, so he made a lot of money. It got to a point too where she was called Queen Karen in the neighborhood and her dishing out HOA fines. Now I used to go in person to collect the rent because the people that rented my house were good friends of mine. I did this for months, so I would park my car by the front of the garage, and my friends were having some music on, but it wasn't that loud. Queen Karen came over, driving her golf cart, and said,
"Excuse me?
"Yeah?"
You have to turn that music down. It's too loud."
I told her that it was 8 p.m. and that music that's even loud can be played until 10. She wasn't having it and demanded that I do so. Now my friends and I kept the music going and we were enjoying ourselves, and she proceeded to get angry and fined me. Now most people will just take the abuse and pay the fine, but not me. I went to the HOA board, contested the fine, and won. From that point on, Queen Karen made it her personal mission to destroy me. She would bitch and fuss about every little thing. I fought what I could, but I did end up paying for some of it. She also went after my tenants, which made things worse for me. I had a sit down with some of my friends one night to discuss the problems. When I parked my car, Queen Karen came over in her robe and said I had to park somewhere else. I did because I didn't want to start anything. We see her go back into her house and embrace a man that isn't her husband. They were being noisy, and we came to the conclusion that she was cheating on her husband. Spoiler alert, she was. My friend and I told Queen Karen's husband. I'm sure he did some investigation because 3 months later they divorced and he was moving his stuff out. Now gossip said that Queen Karen got nothing because she was the one that cheated and she didn't have a job, so she wasn't entitled to the money. From this point on, Queen Karen had a massive decline in the quality of life that she had. She sold her car and got a cheaper one, and she adopted different dressing habits. But even after the divorce, she never got a job and she was still living somewhat better than everyone else. Fast forward to 1986 in February, Queen Karen and the HOA had been giving out fines for very, very obscure things and increased monthly dues. Having trash cans out a couple of hours early or after the trash man would leave would result in a fine. Targeting people that had older or dirty cars goes on and on. Me and the other people in the community were sick of the crap that she and the HOA were pulling, so at the next meeting, we made our voices heard. Queen Karen said that the community had been falling behind on repairs and that the dues and increase in fines were necessary, especially if people weren't maintaining their own property. She said that it was in the yearly budget report and that she would have read it. The other pissed residents and I go and read the statement. Now, none of us read it because we take it as junk mail and disregard it, but we read the whole statement cover to cover. Queen had increased the HOA budget 15%, and where that extra money was going remained unknown. We went over to her house the next day and demanded to know where the extra money was being spent, but she refused several times. She closed the door and went back to watching TV, we filing a joint lawsuit to find out where the money was going. In June, we found out. Cue the revenge. Queen Karen was living off HOA fines and dues. The increase is because she was running out of money. She still didn't have a job, so she embezzled from the HOA so she wouldn't have to. She gets busted. We call the police for her embezzling the money. She was charged with fraud and extortion. The neighbors and I filed a joint lawsuit against Karen to get reimbursement as well, because she had no money, so she had to mortgage her house to pay us all. She later went to federal prison for 6 years with no parole. Because she went away, no one was paying on her house, the bank foreclosed on it, and it was bought by someone else. So when she got out in 1992, she was homeless. Honestly, the majority of us didn't want to ruin her life like this. Had she toned down the excessive fines, we would have let her be, but she had to double down and steal from us because she didn't want to get a job like everyone else. Edit. Okay, I didn't think I would have to explain this, but no, I didn't call Queen Karen a Karen in 1985. I just used the name here because I've been told that is what you call an undesirable, noisy lady. I can't use her real name for privacy, so I named her that for the purpose of this story. Side note, if that last story sounded a little disjointed, that's because it is. I'm guessing that this person's first language is not English, but I did read it almost word for word, only adjusting in places that felt like it needed it in order for the sentence to make sense. The long game. This is a long story, so settle back and relax. I love this sub, and I've taken to asking friends about great revenge stories. This one comes from my boss who lives in the small town where it occurred. To set the stage, many decades ago, Barney and Betty immigrated from Europe and bought a farm. A few years later, they had kids and sponsored Wilma from the old country as a nanny. She met Fred, a local boy, fell in love and got married. Wilma stayed on as the nanny and Fred worked as a farmhand. Their kids and Barney and Betty's kids grew up together, and it was pretty much a big blended family. Years go by, and Barney and Betty decided to sell the farm fields to Farmer Frank, but kept the land that the house was on. They made enough off the sale to build a nice new house, rezoned the property lines, and they broke the lot up into 2 parcels, one for the new house and one for the existing house, which they gifted to Fred and Wilma as a recognition of their years of dedicated and loving service. Both houses shared a well and a septic field. More time went by, Barney and Betty passed away, and their house was inherited by their son, Bam Bam. Fred also passed away, and Wilma stayed in the house. She was an angel. Everyone in the town knew and loved her. She was like the town's grandmother. She was active in the church and liked nothing more than crocheting booties for anyone in town that had a baby. Sadly, Wilma passed away too, and her house was inherited by her daughter, Pebbles. She was all well established in a nearby metropolitan city and made the decision to sell the house. And so it begins. It was purchased by a builder from the city, which we'll call Dick. The name suits him. He wanted it as a country getaway, as he already had a place in the city. He got approval to improve the place, and his plans were to convert the barn into a multi-car garage with a man cave and an apartment in what was the loft. He started by tearing down the house, with plans to replace it with a bigger, more modern house. The house was torn down and the new build was started. The lower part of the yellow represents a very narrow driveway. Between the driveway and Farmer Frank's field was a drainage culvert, so the contractors started parking their vehicles on Bam Bam's lot. Side note here, they did have a diagram, but I'm not sure if it's going to be incorporated into the video. It's not super important. Bam Bam asked the contractors not to do it, but they didn't stop. So he approached Dick, and the conversation didn't go well. Dick was an entitled big shot dealing with what he thought was a country bumpkin. To give you an idea, Dick once went to the local diner and asked for the wine list. He was aggressive and disrespectful, and this pretty much set the tone for all future interactions. Bam Bam had enough. These contractor trucks were tearing up his ground, so one weekend he built a fence along the border between his house and Dick's. It wasn't a complicated fence. He just got a buddy with a post hole digger on his bobcat, sunk posts, and strung planks between them. This caused no end of trouble with the build. There was no room to park in the yellow for the contractors without getting in each other's way, and they couldn't park in the driveway, which was only wide enough for one vehicle at a time. Contractors were pissed off. They had a long walk from the road to the build site and had to carry tools and equipment back and forth. Either that, or take turns dropping materials, waiting hours for the carpenters to finish unloading the lumber so that the plumbers could unload the pipe. Dick was furious and came stomping over to Bam Bam's demanding that he dismantle the fence. Bam Bam told him to go to hell, and then a day later, Bam Bam saw that someone had removed some of the fence and the contractor trucks were back on his land. Okay, thought Bam Bam, let's play. The following weekend, Bam Bam irrigated the area where the contractors were parking. Irrigated it along and continuously. He probably had to get a water delivery to make it happen, as the well had a limited capacity. On Monday, the first contractor to arrive turned off Dick's driveway to go through the fence and immediately sank up to his axles in mud. Did I mention that Bam Bam owned the local service station and knew every tow truck company within 100 miles? As it turned out, everyone they called was too busy to pull the truck out, and they had to call a tow truck from the city almost 2 hours away. You can see how the relationship between Bam Bam and Dick became somewhat less than neighborly. Time went by and Dick's house was completed. It was a low-maintenance setup with interlocking brick over the compound, tall hedges separating Dick from Bam Bam. They kept out of each other's way, but they certainly weren't pals. Dick's kids would come up on the weekend and would have a party now and then, but Bam Bam put up with it. One issue that arose was when Dick decided to fill the small swimming pool that he had installed. This drew the well dry and caused some sand to be pulled into the water treatment equipment. When Bam Bam approached Dick about the cost of the repair via email, Dick basically replied that it was Bam Bam's problem. The same when the septic holding tank needed to be pumped. Bam Bam offered to split the cost of pumping, and Dick refused to part with a dime. Years passed, and Dick decided to list the house for sale. That's when Bam Bam made his move. He cut the water and capped the septic line leading from Dick's house. Then he informed the real estate agent of what he had done. Well, that induced a thunderstorm for sure. There's no way Dick could sell a house that had no water or any way to dispose of waste. He couldn't build a septic field on his property as it was too small. He approached Farmer Frank to buy some of his land, but was rebuffed. His only option would have been to install a septic holding tank, but the only place to put it would have been right in the middle of his compound, and septic tanks can be aromatic. It would have also meant removing the in-ground pool. Dick tried to argue in court that he was entitled to access the well water and the septic field, but Bam Bam won, arguing that Wilma and Fred were given the water and septic as a courtesy, and that there was no contractual obligation to provide Dick either well water or septic access. There was nothing in the deed to Wilma and Fred that could be grandfathered in, and Dick's emails refusing to pay for maintenance to either system was the nail in the coffin. The property sat vacant and unusable for months. The price dropped through the floor, and the few people that expressed interest in the property approached Bam Bam with varying offers of cash to restore service. Bam Bam declined, and no offers were made to Dick for the house. Finally, Dick did receive an offer from a numbered corporation, an offer that was about a quarter of the asking price. As is, with a statement that if the buyer was aware that there was no water or septic service to the property. Without much choice, Dick accepted the offer. And that's how Bam Bam bought himself a beautiful modern country home at a steal of a price. He reattached the water and septic in an afternoon, and moved his furniture down the driveway. He rented his old house out for extra money and had the numbered company negotiate with himself for an arrangement of perpetual use of the well and septic, thereby jacking the value of the house up by a factor of 4. Later, if he decides to sell it, he'll be making a massive profit. Bam Bam now enjoys a country paradise and is the social king of the hill in his town. All because Dick decided to be a dick. TLDR, don't be a shit and you won't have to deal with shit. And with that, my friends, we've reached the end of today's video. Have you ever had any sort of troubles with your local neighbors? Let me know about it in the comments section below. As always, my name's Ryan, the official host here at Reddit Voice, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. But before I go, I must let you know that we are very close to 1,000 subscribers. And that means I am willing to pull out all the stops at this point. Let me know also in the comments if you have any ideas of various subreddits you'd like to see on the channel. We're taking requests, and we want to know what the people want to see. See you later.